All right, we've got the 126 United States Amateur coming up here at Merion Golf Club, one of the greatest golf courses in America, in the world, really. And we've got Brentley Romine from Golf Channel. Brentley, you were out there a couple weeks ago for Media Day. How you feeling in general? How do you like the course?
Well, first off, thanks for having me, Garrett. And I know we probably share this sentiment, but truly one of the coolest golf courses I've ever gotten the privilege to play. And it was a bit unfortunate that Mother Nature wasn't too kind to us, so didn't get to play the 18th hole or 1 through 3. But of the 14 holes that I did play, a really cool test, a lot of variety, a lot of history, both on the course and in the clubhouse. It seems like everywhere you go, you see a plaque, whether that be Hogan's plaque from the 1950 U.S. Open on the middle of the 18th fairway, or
Oh
Bobby
yeah.
Jones's plaque just behind that 11th tee box area when he completed the Grand Slam in 1930. So, really, really neat spot, and I'm excited to see how a 6,900-yard golf course keeps some of the world's best amateurs at bay for for 6 or 7 days.
Yeah, and I like what you just referred to. There's so many historical spots on the course. I think of that plaque on 18, but there's so much as well too. How Bobby Jones completed the Grand Slam on number 11. You know what I mean? That green is phenomenal, and just the history that goes into that. I'm curious, like for fans at home, they have to realize there are so many amazing spots at Merion Golf Club.
Yeah, and holes that are pretty iconic outside of that too. I think the fifth hole probably comes to mind too, where everything has this severe tilt from right to left, and that hole to me really encapsulates all 18 at Marion. Even though there is so much variety, I think you could point to that hole and just the uniqueness of it. You don't see that too often, and so yeah, I mean, you mentioned the 11th green. I mean, I look at that hole particularly in that it's not very long and it's all about placement golf and really penal fairway bunker on the left, but it's gonna force guys to either try to take off a bunch with driver and sort of blow it over the trouble, but risk getting into the rough or deciding whether to lay back like pretty severely. So again, 10th hole as well, kind of a drivable par four, but one that you really have to rope one in there from right to left. And I think some lefties, we get a lot of good ones in the field too, whether it be Miles Russell or
Yeah.
Tyler Watts or Luke Colton. Like that's a hole that I think fits their shot shape. But then at the same time, there's certainly some holes where you have to work it left to right as well. There's out of bounds everywhere. I've touched on this a few times on different mediums, but the fact that there's only two par fives and they're come on the first four holes of the golf course,
Great point.
that's unique too. And so it's just there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack, and it's been a while since we've seen Marion on kind of the big scale. We did have a Curtis Cup back in 2022, which I believe you were at, or at least at the media day for that as well. And but other than that, most people haven't seen this since 2013, and really since before Gil Hanse and Jim Wagner renovated the course. That work was completed in 2019. So but again, there's a lot there, but it's not often you have the golf course as the star of the show, but it seems like more often than not in recent years, the U.S. Amateur, that the golf course has been kind of that number one storyline going into the championship.
Yes, I would totally agree. And I think as it relates to match play, this course for match play, Marion Golf Club, to me, I think is phenomenal. And I say that because the greens are the great equalizer, in my opinion. Yes, they're slopey. You can get into trouble off the tee. You can get into trouble in the rough at Marion. The bunkers are penal. It's very difficult. But you get on the greens, I think about number 9. It's a beast of a long par 3, but it's fairly flat on certain sections. And I remember I made a bomb out there on media day, and you can make putts. These players in a match play environment can actually make putts and stay in a match, and momentum shifts are going to happen, in my opinion. You're going to see that. I'm curious what you make of basically the match play aspect of this course.
Yeah, I kind of anticipate we're going to see some holes in some matches more often than not where guys are playing a completely different strategy. One guy might choose to
Yeah.
hit driver or 3-wood while someone else hits 5 or 6 iron off the tee, and there's going to be some big swings once you get on and around these greens and the bunkering and spots. I think about kind of a spot that someone I played with in media day got in at the very back part of that left bunker on 12. You had to basically play it back down the bunker just to have a shot at the hole. That green kind of slopes away from you there if you're in that trap. So
Yep.
again, I'm excited for that match play aspect, in that you're going to think one guy's has the clear advantage in a hole after the tee shot, and then by the time you get on the green, it could have completely flipped. So you know 10's kind of a cool hole for match play, I think. uh, Certainly 14, 15, 16's really cool. And you know even one, I like one kind of gets overlooked, and um, in
Totally
that,
does.
but I think one's a really cool hole, and there's kind of some different ways to play that as well. But yeah, I think you're definitely spot on that the greens are kind of the star of the show here, and there's going to be some really long kind of putts that guys have no idea where it's going to break. I was reading or listening to a really cool video earlier, and they were kind of breaking down the greens, and that it's just there's a lot of subtle breaks, and there's a lot of putts where you kind of think it goes one way but it does something completely different. So yeah, it's a pretty pretty cool place.
100%. And I even think number 11, when we've talked about that whole phenomenal hole, but it gets into like it's like the edge of a banana, the top of a banana on the left side. It is so narrow, Brentley. And when that pin's on the left, you can go after a sucker pin as I did immediate day. And if you're just left, you're in that bunker, you're in the cabbage, and you got to get up and down to a just no man's land. It's unbelievable how difficult some of the up and downs are at Merion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how firm and fast it gets. Part of the big changes, although it's not like Gil Hanse and Jim Wagner came in and totally redid the golf course. They basically redid the bunkering and the greens to kind of modern spec, because the course had really been unchanged since 1930. And so, but they installed kind of a sub air, I think they call it precision air, under the greens to kind of be able to control the firmness and really get this course at championship level. Because as people will find out next week, and
Mm.
particularly back a few weeks ago when we were out there, it was very rainy, very humid. It's going to be very hot. I was just looking at the weather forecast for next week, and
Oh
there's
yeah.
not going to be a ton of rain, but the feels like temperature is 90 or above pretty much every single day. So the hot and humid conditions, like, that doesn't lend itself to firm and fast. But I think they're gonna get their hands on the dial and kind of crank it up and get these balls rolling and stuff. So on a hole like 11, if the pin is on the left, I think that kind of tells you
Oof.
what you have to do off the tee. You have to be more aggressive. You got to hit something longer, and you got to make sure that you have a wedge in, because if you hit driver, you're gonna have a very very short yardage to the hole. But if the pin's on the right, and where you can kind of access it a little better, maybe you do lay back. So again, it's just one more thing to think about. And I think the guys who are going to play the best in this championship are ones that are used to kind of the classic way of playing golf, and
Mm.
kind of the old school architecture, and picking your spots and having proper angles, and not just trying to play what some people have termed bully ball. That's probably not going to be a recipe for success, at least throughout a 7-day championship. So I think the guys who are used to that and are smart and are good with their wedges, and also have really crafty short games too for when they do get in trouble. I think that's probably the archetype of player who's going to lift the Havemeyer on Sunday.
Well, speaking of crafty short games, you got to think Miles Russell being one of the favorites this week at Merion. What have your interactions been like with Miles this year?
Look, Miles, I feel like a broken record, always talking about it, but he really is a throwback, and
I like
he's
that.
got a he's got a really calm, kind of mature mind, even though he looks like he's about 13 or 14 still, and still a very small kid, but he's got a lot of game. He's got a really complete game. The only concern I think watching him over the last month or so is the driver has been a little troublesome. So it'll be interesting if he doesn't have to hit many drivers, which a lot of these guys won't. Does that play into his hands even more? Like if he's able to kind of keep that club in the bag more often than not because it's been giving him fits. So um, look, Miles is one of the best we've seen at this age in a long, long time, and being around him at U.S. Open final qualifying this year, and um, watching him from afar, go through the U.S. Junior bracket and make a little bit of a run at the Western Am. Like I think he's ready to put one of these big amateur tournaments on his resume because that's kind of the only knock on him so far is that he hasn't won a USGA championship for that
Yep.
matter, or kind of one of those big amateur tournaments. The biggest amateur win he has is the South Beach from a couple years ago.
Hmm.
He's come close at the Jones Cup. He's come close at the Northeast. But when you look at the fact that Tyler Watts, who's the same age, or year older than him, but Tyler going to Tennessee this fall, Miles at 2027. Tyler has won both the Sunny-Hana and the Northeast, so he's got kind of the bigger profile wins. If
Well,
Miles wins the USAM this week, like I think we can kind of answer any question on whether Miles is the best since Tiger Woods. Like I've said that before. I
mm,
said it just recently. Like he's the best high schooler since Tiger Woods. I still think that talent wise and what he's been able to do um, from a junior golf perspective and all the wins that he has there. He's going to be the first player to ever win 3 AJGA Rolex Junior Player of the Year awards coming up. So
not bad.
um, yeah, but if he could win a U.S. Amateur, like that would further solidify things.
How about Ryder Cowan, who was, of course, tied for low am at the United States Open, and Preston Stout, we know, is right up there as well. What about those guys?
Yeah, but Preston is someone I think that even though he's the number one amateur in the world, you could argue that he's got a pretty big chip on his shoulder, and that
Okay.
everyone has been talking about Jackson Coyven for the last couple of years since Preston has really ascended. But Preston's done a lot of the same things that Jackson has. He's obviously moved to number one in the world amateur golf ranking. He's won 3 straight conference championships, although Preston being in the Big 12, Jackson did it over in the SEC, which is obviously a little bit deeper of a men's golf conference
Yeah,
there. But yeah, I mean, he hasn't really had the type of success in his PGA Tour starts and the exemptions that he has gotten. But again, like last year, he was the medalist at the USAM. That's something Coyven certainly didn't do, and he had a nice little run through match play before running into Niall Shields Donegan and
oh yeah.
losing a couple holes late and ultimately falling in that match. But Preston's going to have a big motivation in that the last time the number one amateur in the world has won the USAM was in 2010 when another Oklahoma State player, Peter Uihlein,
Peter
did it.
Uline, yep.
So, um, so yeah, so that's kind of the genesis kind of surrounding Preston and with Ryder, he really hasn't been in the spotlight for very long. He's kind of been a solid player for the
Sure.
first couple of years at Oklahoma, and not until last season did he step up his game. He was first team All American for the first time. He was one of the 10 finalists for the Fred Haskins Award, and then he goes and further proves it by sharing low medalist honors at or low AM honors at Shinnecock. So he didn't really play a ton this summer, other than the U.S. Open and the Palmer Cup. He played the Trans-Miss, which is probably more of like a B tier, B plus tier summer amateur tournament, but he finished runner up there. And then he played in the 3M a couple weeks ago and finished a shot or two off the cut line. So he's going to have a lot to prove. He hasn't really done much on the summer amateur circuit yet, and but those are two guys that fit a very similar kind of skill set in terms of just ball strike it around, really rely on that, and hope that it's one of those weeks where the putter doesn't cost you a lot.
Is there a Mason Howell for this year? A guy that plays his way onto the Walker Cup team because of getting it done.
Well, I mean, probably. We've seen that more often than not the last handful of USAMs. Like last year, obviously you mentioned Mason, but I go back before that. Before that 21 Spring Walker Cup at Seminole, Tyler Strafacci won at Bandon in 2020, and he wouldn't have been on the team otherwise. Year before that, Andy Ogletree winning at Pinehurst in
Whew.
2019. He probably wouldn't have been on the team at Royal Liverpool. So I certainly think with a 312 player field and only in my estimation, probably about 12 to 13 guys really in the mix resume wise for a Walker Cup spot. Like the
Mm,
odds probably say that someone is going to steal a spot. Doc Redman, another great example in 2017, stole
totally.
what was Sam Burns' spot. I mean, I think everyone could agree there that Sam ended up being the first alternate, but was a guy who was the first left off that team, and so that could absolutely happen. And I think that would be a real bummer for kind of those four guys who I think are really in the running for the last two spots. That being Kihei Akina, Eric
Mm,
Lee, Carson Bertagnol, and then Jay Lang, who just won the Western Am, to
mm,
I think move his way onto the team at this point in time.
mm. I mean, there's so many other directions to go. I know you mentioned Luke Colton in the past, or actually earlier in this podcast. You got Philip Dunham's another lefty, and you've also got the U.S. Junior Am winner. I know he's a lefty, but Noah McLaughlin. What other name or two do you really want to look at?
Yeah, there's a few guys who I think could be not necessarily sleepers, but if we're going to talk outside of the Preston Stout, Miles Russells, even like a William Jennings. I think
Sure.
he's a guy who I've documented a little bit the last year or two, but couldn't even break 90 in his first college start 2 springs ago. Shot
Ah,
92 in his first round at Watersound. Was going to shoot in the 90s again, but Jay Sewell took the scorecard out of his hand on the 18th
ah,
hole and withdrew him. Probably for the best, but a guy who has won some big events, whether it be the Hogan at Colonial last fall. He was runner-up at the NCAA as a big kid. I would consider him kind of one of the favorites. But as far as like sleepers, I'm kind of eyeing Connor Graham, like all the way down there at 25th
okay.
in the world.
Sure.
Uh, someone who I don't know if he's got the temperament to handle the ups and downs and the swings of match play. But he's been playing really well. He shot 62 at the South of Ireland in the last round of stroke play qualifying at that event, which was played at Lahinch. He's not technically on the GBNI Walker Cup team yet, but by all accounts, like he's gonna be one of those 10 guys. He's already played in two. This will be his third, but really good short game, really good wedge player, and
Mm,
someone who's in pretty good form. I'm interested to see where Max Herrendine's game is. It seems like he's finally gotten it back after I think he would agree, a pretty disappointing junior year at Illinois. Willie Walsh has had a really good summer. Pepperdine, he'll probably be a first or second team All American next year. He's someone to keep an eye on. I think he could. I mean, you could go down the list and say that with match play and a championship that has seen the likes of Stephen Fox and Gun Yang win, in addition to a Bryson in 2015 or Victor Hovland in 2018. Like, there's a lot of guys who probably will enter next week and think that they have a really good shot.
100%. Lots to look forward to. Brentley Romine from Golf Channel. You love this stuff. You are very passionate about it, and I appreciate you coming on and chatting about these United States Amateur coming up here at Merion.
Awesome, Garrett. Well, thank you for having me, and yeah, hopefully we can have a nice debrief after this championship and maybe preview some Walker Cup stuff for you.
Absolutely, man. Great to see you, and we'll catch up down the line.
Yep.